In this lesson, we'll look at how we can start to assemble and organize our geometry into more complex models. So we've looked at a few of the tools that we can use to change the shape and modify individual pieces of geometry. Let's now take a look at how we can start to get those pieces together to create more complex models, because as we look at the models we see around us, they're going to be made up of multiple pieces in most cases. And so let's start by just importing, this is lesson 10 start, and let's go ahead and import the result of our last 3 lessons. So we'll go, and let's actually just go to merge. And I'm going to choose lesson 07 end, and we'll select all of the pieces of geometry. Okay, let's go ahead and do another merge with lesson 08 end, and we can select all of those. And we'll do the same thing with 09 end. Bring in all of these pieces that we created in various ways. We can go ahead and rename this. Okay, so now we have all of these separate pieces. We now need to start to organize and create something larger out of these, something more complex. And so the first thing we'll do is I'm going to go ahead and take this purple tube here, and let's transform this. So we will scale it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and scale this up. I also want to rotate it. Okay, so I can start rotating it. I can also right click on rotate, and I can actually start to just rotate it here in this box and actually get an exact value here of 90 degrees. Okay, we'll go ahead and kind of move this over. Okay, we can change the color of our objects here. So selecting this NURB surface, you can just click on this object color. I'm just going to make it black. We'll click on this wheel here, and we'll make it gray. Okay. Now if we take a look at some of the other pieces, you can see that we have, let's say, this lug nut here. You can see that right now it's 2 pieces, and we really want it to be one piece, right? So there are a few ways that we could do that. We looked at grouping, but we can also make this part of the same object. So if you have something like this that's never going to be separated, it's always going to be part of a single piece, we can actually combine these together. So we'll go ahead and take this editable poly, okay, and then this one, you can see that we have a couple of modifiers on this. If you want to bake down that information, we can go ahead and just go to collapse all, and that will create just an editable poly, take away all of the modifiers that we used, and just bake that into the surface. So we get the same visual result, but because we had the mesh smooth on, you can see how it's much higher res. So we have our editable polys here, and what we want to do is go ahead, if I can scroll down here, I'm going to go to edit geometry, and I want to attach, and I've got just the head of the nut here. And so we'll go to attach, and now we can select any other pieces that we want to attach to this. And so watch what happens with the color. If we go ahead and click on that, it actually takes on the same color as this object. So now, go ahead and turn off attach. Instead of having 2 separate objects, we have one object here. Okay? And remember when we talked about selecting elements? Well, we can still select these individually by selecting the element subobject. And so you can see that those are separated, and so we can still select those, but they're part of the same editable poly. So that just makes keeping track of those things a little bit easier. Okay, let's go ahead and select this piece, and we'll go ahead and rotate that as well. Let's go to scale, and we'll just scale this up and move it out in the Y here. Okay, this is our spline that we have here. We don't have to convert this to a polygon. I'm just going to rotate this, again 90 degrees. Okay, and we can take this, and if we want to kind of scale it down a bit, push it in there right on top. Okay, we want to make sure that it's in the center, so we'll just move it over slightly. Now we'll take our bolt here, and let's rotate that as well. Okay, and then we want to scale this down and just place it in one of the holes that we created. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and move this over and down, kind of moving up in on this. Okay, so something like that. And now duplicating objects is going to be really important when you're doing modeling, because oftentimes you're going to have repetitive patterns and repetitive models. You know, if you're doing architecture and you've got columns, you don't want to build every column. You want to build one column and then duplicate it to create the others. So really quick and easy way of getting a lot of detail. So in 3ds Max, it's very easy to duplicate. We'll just hold down Shift and then move in the Z. It'll ask me, how do I want to clone this? Do I want to create a copy or an instance? For now, we'll just look at creating a copy. Okay, and so now we have a new copy, and we can go ahead and move that into position. Okay, we do the same thing here. If I want to create multiple copies, I can do that in here as well. Okay, if you have something more complex, and we go through this in several of our courses, but you can actually duplicate based on your rotation. So if you kind of move your pivot, or you can use a working pivot, you can actually rotate this around and create all these copies in with one push. Okay, let's go ahead and take this, and we'll change the color of this as well. And we can change our bolts. Now, if we've got all of our bolts here, we could go in and actually combine these together or attach them together as well. If you wanted them to be one piece, if you knew that they're only going to be in this configuration, then you could do that. Okay, so we'll change the color here. And this isn't the material, just an object color. Okay, so now we want to organize this. Right now we've got all of these separate pieces, and so we want to organize this together. So to do that, we can go into our schematic and look at this. Okay, you can see we have the pieces in here. We'll turn on this. Okay, so we've got all of these pieces. So let's grab these pieces here, and let's go ahead and group those together, and we'll call this wheel group. And now we can move that group around as a whole. Okay, moving that around. Okay, so using the same techniques, we could build something that is a little bit more complex, like this complete car. And this, we actually go through step by step this particular car in the automotive modeling in 3ds Max, this Mustang. And so now let's take this wheel that we've got and let's rotate it. So this time I'm going to rotate it in the Z, and let's rotate it 90 degrees. Let's go ahead and scale this down a bit, and we'll move it over into position. I get it in the right spot. And so you can just start to assemble your hierarchy. So even if you've got something complex like a vehicle, if you just break it down into smaller chunks, you can really start to get something that looks nice just by thinking about it in smaller terms and not worrying so much about the overall look, getting intimidated by it. Okay, so this is actually, as I said, from the automotive modeling portion, but there's a lot of different options for you to create models just by building small little pieces like we did, and then either attaching those together, assembling those into groups, and then duplicating those. You can really start to add a lot of detail very quickly. Okay, so this brings us to the conclusion of this beginner's guide to modeling in 3ds Max. Now from here, if you want to learn more about modeling and about 3ds Max, Digital Tutors has several different training courses that you could go through at this point. A good place to start would actually be the Introduction to 3ds Max, where we go through the building of this particular racer, as well as some of the texturing. We go through interface also. It's just a good overview of 3ds Max if you're not that familiar with 3ds Max. But there is a a good modeling section there to take you through the building of this piece. Now, if you're still interested in going through modeling at that point, then the next step would be to go through the introduction to modeling in 3ds Max. In this one, we use a project-based approach where we build the entire thing, but we use a variety of different tools. So lots of polygon tools, and some NURBS, some subdivision surfaces, and we really go over the focus is getting a good overview of the most commonly used modeling tools that we're going to be using in 3ds Max. Okay, and then we cover also some spline-based approaches that we just kind of touched on in this course. Okay, so it's going to be really important that you go through this if you're interested in modeling. And then from there you can go into more project-based courses like building interiors onto the motorcycles and characters, and finally the car that we looked at previously. Is going to be something that you can go through step by step, and using some of the same tools that we just looked at in a couple of lessons, building something like that. Okay, so if you enjoyed the course and you want to learn more, make sure to check out some of these additional courses that we have here available at digitaltutors.com.